Our guest tonight is Jayson X with the World Union of Deists. Jayson, thank you very much for joining the show.
Hi, Deborah. Thanks for having me.
Well, when you hear the GOP continually talking about Christian nationalism and their biblical worldview, is that in line with your understanding of what the deistic founding fathers may have thought?
No. People like Thomas Jefferson went out of their way to reject Christianity, and said some things that show that they did not want to have government intertwined with the religion.
And I think that the American public is beginning. I don't even know how to explain this. You've got the GOP and the Tea Party that really do think that we're this Christian nation, but then we have these polls that keep coming out, and the Pew Forum says that 16.1% of Americans are no longer affiliated with religion, and these numbers keep growing. And, not all of them are atheists. A lot of them are spiritual. They still believe in a God. And in my point of view, I think that deism might have some appeal to them. Were you in organized religion before you became a deist? And if so, why the switch?
Yes, I was. I was raised Eastern Orthodox Christian. And if you know a Greek Orthodox Christian or a Russian Orthodox Christian, you know an Eastern Orthodox Christian. I went to seminary at Holy Cross Greek Orthodox School of Theology. I was ordained, and I served as a priest for 3 years. If you ever want to learn something well, try to teach it well. And I tried to teach Christianity well. While I was doing that, I came to the conclusion that Christianity is approximately 50% false and 10% evil. I also came to the conclusion that everyone in my congregation and everyone else I knew outside my congregation would be better off basing their beliefs on a reason-based philosophy rather than a faith-based religion. So I had to get out of it.
Actually, I'm formerly a Eastern Orthodox, Greek Orthodox Christian. That was where I was brought up in until my mom remarried into the Pentecostals, which was I might still be a Christian today if that latter part hadn't happened, because Eastern Orthodox, Greek Orthodox Christianity, it has to be my favorite form of Christianity. I think they're the most reasonable among unreasonable people, as far as I can say.
Yeah, to tell you the truth, I might have stayed Christian if I hadn't gone to seminary. It was by going to seminary that I learned enough about the Bible to realize, hey, a lot of this is nonsense.
And we hear more and more about that with clergy who go to, or people who go to seminary. Even Chris Hedges, he's got the master's in divinity from Harvard. I've heard him say that the Jesus Christ story is a myth. And, many of them do. But for those of the people in our audience who don't really know what deism is, can you kind of explain that for them, Jayson?
Yes. Deism is the philosophy that teaches just two things. One should base one's beliefs on reason and reason alone. And two, reason leads one to conclude that God exists, or at least probably exists.
And so, but sometimes deists are thrown into the free thinkers category. Would you say that would be, which also atheists and agnostics are in that category, would you say it's because of the rejection of revealed text, maybe, that they are considered free thinkers?
I think it has more to do with basing beliefs on reason. I think deists, agnostics, and atheists are the three theological groups of people, and I say theological because their philosophies have something to do with either the acceptance or rejection of a belief in God. All three of those groups base their beliefs on reason, and in my opinion, everyone else doesn't. And that's why those three groups are closely related.
Mm-hmm. And so, when you made that switch from being a pretty committed Christian to being a deist, was that a difficult switch for you in terms of, dealing with your family and that kind of thing, or was it a pretty smooth transition?
It was very difficult. I have a friend. He was the best man at my wedding. He's now a monk on Mount Athos in Greece. And he wrote to me, and he said that he fell to the ground weeping when he heard that I left the church. And ultimately, it contributed a lot to my divorce. But, you know, I can't believe in the story of the Bible any more than I can believe in Greek mythology, and I didn't want to live a lie. Also, I actually got out of the ministry for the same reason I got into it. I became a priest to make the world a better place, and then I came to the conclusion this is not the way to make the world a better place. And so I left for that reason. I thought that, and I still think, that promoting reason is what will help humanity and all the creatures humanity impacts.
Oh, I totally agree with that. Now, deists do not subscribe to, and I say this in quotes, revealed texts, you know, revealed by some kind of deity. God wrote the Bible, and, oh, my gosh, you should have heard this hell show we had a couple of weeks ago, Jayson. This man that was on there was like, I mean, he said that the Bible was the literal word of God, and, you know, people that didn't believe in Jesus, had never heard of Jesus, for, you know, like a century after Jesus allegedly died, we're all going to hell. That was unreal. HD, you were asking some pretty good questions. Was he? I even
said, okay, 30 days, 45 days, 50 days after Jesus was around, and you have people in Japan, you know, on there. Are you literally telling me that no one died after Jesus died without having heard and completely understood the Christian text? And his response was, why are you speaking in hypotheticals?
Yeah,
I'm not.
I mean, extreme literalistic interpretation of the Bible. Now, deism rejects that. Can you tell us a little bit why, Jayson?
Well, as far as we know, God did not write any book on earth. These books on earth were written by human beings. And God did create the universe, though. So if we want to know God, we should study the universe using reason and science. Metaphorically speaking, the universe is the only book that we know of that God wrote. So that's the one we should be reading.
There was a question in the chat room. Somebody wants to know why, Jayson, you stayed with the belief that there is a higher power. How do you tackle the God of gaps argument from a deistic perspective?
Well, you talked about that survey in the United States that talked about all these people that were leaving church but still believe in God. And I think the reason that the majority of humanity believes in God is that the universe seems created. So if you look at the universe, like I do, and you think about it, you think, did this come about haphazardly, most likely, or was this somehow purposefully created? And I come to the latter belief. And so that's the argument from design. And another argument I use is the first cause argument. You know, everything was created by something, or everything came from something except for ultimately the first cause, which a lot of people call the Big Bang, but then the question is, what caused the Big Bang? And if I had to put my money on it, I would just say that the Big Bang was caused by God. If an atheist had to put his or her money on it, the atheist would say the Big Bang was caused by something other than God.
Okay. We've got a call.
The thing that I would bring up here is that when I hear the first cause argument, well, let's start with the first one, the design argument. I find that to be a bit fallacious because we used to believe that lightning was designed, or that lightning had no cause, and we had to appeal to that. We had to appeal to a God to understand this energy coming from seemingly nowhere. To say that you see something and you can't understand how it could have come out except through an intelligent mind, that's basically an argument from ignorance. And when you're saying the first cause argument, I'm saying the first cause must be God. I don't see any reason to believe that the first cause must be conscious. That you can describe all of these attributes to the first cause. The only one that is really meaningful to this discussion is whether or not this first cause is conscious. I think there's plenty of reasons to think that it could not be conscious, and there's no reason to really assert that consciousness must play a part in this first cause.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, and I tend to avoid debates with intelligent atheists. I actually respect intelligent atheists quite a bit, because it just boils down to, this is what I think, and this is why, and they say, this is what I think, and that's why. And really, what matters more than what people believe is what people do. I would much rather have somebody literally believe in the Bible and not kill me than have somebody completely agree with me theologically and kill me. But I would just like to say one more thing, and that's, you've heard of that the universe, at least to a lot of people, seems fine-tuned for life. And one of the things that really strikes me is that the gravitational constant, which is a physical constant involved in the calculation of the gravitational attraction between objects of mass, if the gravitational constant was a little stronger, the universe would have collapsed on itself by now. If it was a little weaker, the stars would have died out by now because they need much mass to burn. So it's things like that make me think, this universe seems just a little bit too oriented toward ultimately producing life for me not to believe that it was purposefully created.
Yeah, I think we can go around and around, and so I don't even want to go into this discussion because we'll be talking about it for 2 hours because people are never going to agree on that. And but with respect to this God, does the deist God look like a human being as portrayed by the Christian religion, or is it more of a, I don't know, maybe an energy that has some kind of intelligence?
Well, I don't think there's any reason to believe that God looks like a human being. I tend to think of God as looking like something like a brain that creates a thought, but I don't know. God has no need for eyes or ears or a heart. God can see without using eyes, can hear without using ears, lives without a heart. So that's my answer, at least, to that question.
And, in a way, the Buddhists, a lot of the Buddhists view life as, they don't really believe in a deity, but they believe in consciousness, that we're all part of this big consciousness. Do you feel that maybe there's sort of a similarity between the deistic God and the beliefs of Buddhism?
Well, from what I understand about Buddha and his original teachings, not the teachings as they got changed over the centuries,
right,
is that Buddha would not say whether God existed or not. So Buddha had at least a certain level of skepticism, and in that way, I certainly agree with Buddha that we should be very careful about believing things so that we don't accept false beliefs. But I really can't talk much about Buddhism. I've only studied it a little bit here and there.
Yeah. We've got a caller. Can you take a call? Is it all
sure,
right?
It'd be fun.
Okay, and how we work it on the God Discussion Show, and by the way, our call-in number is 914-338-0452. That's 914-338-0452. And I usually just call out the area code. I don't reveal your full number. We don't screen here. So this is an area code 978. Area code 978, thank you for calling the God Discussion Show. Hello.
Hello.
You're on the air.
Hi, my name is Anthony. I'm from Massachusetts, and I just want to say I have emailed Jayson various times, through Deism. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Hi.
Yeah.
Hi, Anthony. Nice to talk to you.
Hey. Thanks. Yeah. I consider myself to be a deist because like as Jayson said before, you look at the universe and I mean, there really is just incredible design, and I know you were saying that one thing about the lightning, but we have no idea what happened. Well, I mean, I'm not going to say we don't have any idea what happened before the Big Bang, but even if we did, I mean, see, basically, like, I think the way a deist would view the world is that, God set the universe in motion and then let it go on its own. Sort of like, I know a lot of deists will use this, but they say, God sort of just built like a toy or whatever and then wound it up and then let it start going or whatever. And I mean, the one argument that I just want to say that atheists use, and, I think it's great that atheists, use their reason and everything, but they say, well, if there is God, then where did God come from? But one thing you have to realize about that argument is that you're assuming that God is limited, and we have two options to the universe. Either the universe is eternal, or there is a first cause of the universe that is eternal. And if God was created, then he wouldn't be God, so what's the point of, we wouldn't call him God. So that, by definition, created gods are a delusion. And I know that's one of the main arguments that Richard Dawkins uses in his book, The God Delusion. But that's all I'd say for that. But
HD, do you have a comment to that one?
Well, yes, as I pointed to before, there could certainly be a first cause, but there's nothing, and you could, if you wanted to call it God, go ahead, but there's nothing about it that requires consciousness. So if you take this idea in your head of what God is and remove consciousness and show me how it is somehow less viable than it was beforehand. If it is not less viable than beforehand, then then there's no reason. If we're going to be steered by reason here, there's no reason to add in consciousness in the first place, and therefore we have no right calling it God, since the definition of God requires a conscious being, a capital B being, in that regard. And I understand the argument that everything looks designed, and even the gravitational constant. But again, these are technically, as far as I can tell, still arguments from ignorance. It's not a testable hypothesis. It's certainly a theory that could fit. It certainly fits that this universe could be created. I'm not going to posit to anyone that I can prove that there's no consciousness beyond the bounds of our universe that created it. What I submit to you and to the other deists that we've been talking to here is that there's no reason to say that we know that there is this conscious being out there. That it's an extra thing that we're putting on to try to just explain away some of the mysteries of the universe. It's the exact same thing that we've been doing with God throughout all of history. Whenever there's something that is unexplained, why is there lightning? God. Why is there this gravitational constant that seems to be in line with life? God. And also the idea of this I've heard the gravitational constant argument on a regular basis, but what that seems to miss is this is a slight oversimplification, but the idea of carbon chauvinism, which is the idea that the only type of life that could exist is us. Maybe maybe stars wouldn't exist. That doesn't mean that life wouldn't exist. It just wouldn't be life as we know it. If the gravitational constant it was changed, maybe there would be life that would come into existence that would say, hey, if this gravitational constant was a little bit, there'd be these fiery engines that would be radiating all of this energy that would make life impossible from their perspective.
Well,
I see the whole thing of deism as a big argument from ignorance, as far as I can tell.
But okay, from that perspective. But let's look at the other thing that Jayson said that I think is very important, and it is the actions. It's the behavior. And you don't see deists out there running around talking about the Book of Revelation and saying that the world is going to end on May 21st. And I had so many emails coming in before Harold Camping's big end of the world thing of people that were really, really frightened that this was really going to happen. This one woman wrote in, and she was pregnant, and she just couldn't understand why a God would be so cruel as to make her pregnant and then end the world. And this is what I like about deism. Jayson, can you address that whole issue about actions and this blind faith and revealed text and the end times?
Well, if you base your beliefs on reason, you only have three theological choices. You can choose to be a deist, you can choose to be an agnostic, or you can choose to be an atheist. I just so happens, my honest opinion is that the universe is probably created on purpose, so I'm a deist. But no matter what theological choice you choose, as long as it's based on reason, you're a lot less likely to believe in something stupid. And also, you're a lot less likely to do something harmful to someone just because you believe that your holy book or your holy leader tells you to do that.
Yeah, and that's where I respect deism so much, because you don't see all that kind of nonsense. And I wanted to touch on the Bible a little bit here. I think that a lot of people, when they make the leap into either deism or agnosticism or atheism, or those three choices that you talked about, is when they sit down and read the Bible from Genesis 1 all the way to the end of Revelation. And you just see all these kind of weird things about birds being bats, and or bats being birds, and you're not supposed to eat four-legged birds, and and then there's all this stuff about predestination, which kind of cancels out everything else it says about your behavior, and then all these God-inspired deaths, like Noah's flood and the treatment of women. What are some of your favorite of the Bible contradictions or nuttiness?
Well, I had a chance to think about this beforehand, so I'll just read to you what I wrote here. I have the funniest Bible verse that I can think of is this contradiction. Who incited David, that's King David, to number Israel, that put Israel through a census? Ironically, 2 Samuel chapter 24, verse 1 says that Yahweh incited David to number Israel, but 1 Chronicles chapter 21, verse 1 says that Satan incited David to number Israel. So is David obeying God or Satan on that one? That kind of cracks me up. He can't figure out the difference, and neither can the Bible. Let's see here. The most frustrating verses that I can think of in the Bible are verses which tell people to base their beliefs on faith rather than reason. That's the root problem. When people base their beliefs on faith, they can believe anything. You can believe in leprechauns based on faith. But if you base your beliefs on reason, yes, you can have honest disagreements like HG and I, but you're not going to say something totally outlandish like leprechauns exist.
Or that HG is going to hell for not believing as you do. I mean, that's a big difference, too, that there's not this stick of threat of hell and eternal damnation if you don't believe.
Oh, I'm not going to hell? Whew, that's a relief.
Well, remember what Mark Twain said. Heaven is good for climate. Hell is good for company.
I love it. Oh, my gosh.
And if I were God, I would rather reward people who base their beliefs on reason and weren't stupid than, people who thought, I'm not sure if God exists. I don't believe in God. Oh, you go burn alive forever. I mean, that's stupid. I mean, there are some atheists who are really good people. Why would you want to burn a relatively good person alive forever just because he didn't believe in God, while you're hidden, by the way, while God is hidden, and reward some guy who's just totally evil all his life and then commits his life to Christ and when he at the age of 13 he was saved regardless of what he did? It's crazy. And,
go
ahead.
Go ahead. Was that
no, go ahead.
Everyone go ahead.
I'll
actually make a comment agreeing with both Jayson and Deborah on the idea of the actions of well, in this case, let's say deists. I might have disagreements with Jayson as far as reason is concerned, and I might think that let's say in some instances that he might not be that he's arguing from a point of irrationality, but so is every other person on the planet, myself included. Everyone has irrational beliefs, and there is no exception to that rule. As far as, and if there is, I have not yet met this person, and I'd love to meet them. The good thing about about deism is that as Jayson said, it's not really a prescriptive belief. He's not going to have to take any actions based upon his belief that's going to be harmful to society. So I think as far as that's concerned, as far as most people's irrational beliefs don't really harm society. So whether or not Jayson is actually, or whether or not deism is or is not going to be rational isn't as important as it would be for a Christian who's going to, as Jayson said, possibly kill you. At this point, we have to consider that we're just talking about things from a sheer intellectual standpoint, and it's not of social importance. So I do respect, as Deborah said, I do respect deists in that regard, and that's why they can be free thinkers. There's no dogma really associated with it, and if there is, it has no social implications.
Well, that's the big thing, the social implications. Was it Anthony, the caller? Sorry if I forgot your name.
Right here.
Anthony. Did you have another comment with respect to this discussion?
Right. Well, one thing I would definitely want to say is that, deism is, I think it's definitely a sort of in the middle of, like, between theism and atheism, because, it definitely, as we just heard, it definitely is a sort of free thought philosophy. And one of the things that I just love about, deism is that, and atheism or any other, type of free thought, philosophy, is that if you basically go anywhere since the beginning of, visual consciousness in animals, or maybe, any throughout human history, you see Christians have, I'm getting too basically anybody can be a deist anywhere, whereas in India you see Hindus, in the Middle East you see Muslims, in Europe and North America you see primarily Christians, but deism, it's just anybody can, go out and say, look at the stars and say, oh, there must be a creator, and that's basically deism. And I often, refer to a lot of the philosophers like Plato and Aristotle and Socrates, and I'm pretty sure they all believed that there was something, beyond this physical world. And one final comment that I definitely want to make about deism and just basically the general belief in God is that when you're talking about God, you're talking about the designer who is outside of the universe. He's not, for example, like if I had a computer in front of me or whatever, and I said, you don't see the designer of the computer inside the computer because the designer is outside of the computer. Same thing I would associate with God, is that God is outside of the universe. Therefore, that's why obviously we can't see him, because he's outside of the universe, maybe in another dimension. I'm not really sure, but that's sort of how I would view God. So yeah, that's my comment about that.
Well, thank you very much for calling me.
When I think about God, when I imagine God to be, and of course this is speculative, I imagine God to be like a brain and the universe of thought within that brain. Well, go on. I'm sorry, Deborah.
Oh, no, that's perfect, because I was going to ask you about that. And I think that's one of the things that Anthony brought up. It is very universal. It's not based on somebody's interpretation of a text or a written text. It's just sort of, even you guys can disagree on what God actually is. But I wanted to touch with the Founding Fathers, because we're going to have a segment on the show with Chris Rada talking about theocracy, and as we're approaching this 2012 election, I'm just hearing more and more of this stuff about how we're a Christian nation and all of that. What were the Founding Fathers? Which ones were deists, and can you kind of explain how they had deistic points of view as a result of the Enlightenment?
Oh, well, all the Founding Fathers were heavily influenced by the Enlightenment, and
all of them? Okay.
I think so. Maybe Patrick Henry really tried not to be, but it's hard to be a smart person in that day and age, smart, educated person, and not be influenced a little bit. There's some debate about whether Washington was a deist or not, but an eminent American historian named James Flexner wrote in his autobiography of Washington called Washington, the Indispensable Man. George Washington subscribed to the religious faith of the Enlightenment. Like Franklin and Jefferson, he was a deist. Which brings us to Franklin and Jefferson. They were definitely deists. Franklin wrote in his autobiography, quote, "Some books against deism fell into my hands, and they were said to be the substance of sermons preached at Boyle's lectures. It happened that they wrought an effect on me quite contrary to what was intended by them. For the arguments of the deists which were quoted to be refuted, appeared to me much stronger than the refutations. In short, I soon became a thorough deist, end quote. And Jefferson, he wrote the Jefferson Bible while President of the United States, which describes the life of Jesus without any miracles, because Jefferson believed in the moral teachings of Jesus, but disbelieved in the miracles of the Bible. He was also the man who coined the phrase and advocated the separation of church and state.
Exactly. You know, you brought up Benjamin Franklin, and one of these things that I hear quite often from the Christian right is that when everybody was gathered together and they're drafting the Declaration of Independence and they couldn't agree, and so Benjamin Franklin says, well, okay, time out, everybody sit down and pray. And then all of a sudden, poof, you know, the Declaration of Independence is written because people prayed. Do deists include prayer, or would, if this even indeed happened with Franklin, is that something that a deist would suggest, or is it sort of like, you know, telling the kids in the playground time out?
Benjamin Franklin was a very practical man. He knew how to get things done, and if he had to fool around with theology outwardly to do it, he would do it. The Presbyterians who met Benjamin Franklin would say stuff like, you know, he's almost a Presbyterian. And the Jews who would meet with Franklin would say, you know, he's almost a Jew. And of course the deists would say he's a deist. Yeah, but I know he was a deist. Most deists don't pray too much, if they pray at all. They don't expect God to work like a genie. I sometimes say prayers of thanks to God just because I'm feeling the mood. And, you know, every now and then, to be honest with you, I hedge my bets. I think, oh, geez, for a tough circumstance, God, if you're willing to help me out, go ahead. George Washington did that during the dark days of the American Revolution. Why not? But as George Washington said, the Creator is inscrutable. We don't know what God's going to do, and certainly God is not our genie.
You know, somebody said in the chat room, I have never heard this before. Maybe you know something about it. Brandon says, didn't Jefferson swear in on a Quran? I never heard of that. Is that true, or have you heard that?
That's new to me.
I don't know, but I do know there was one president, I can't remember what it was, but he swore in on a stack of law books, and he made sure no Bible was there. And he was trying to make the point that there should be a separation between government and religion.
Okay.
I'll do some fact-checking on the Quran thing. I'm pretty sure I would have heard of that by now if that was the truth.
Well, that's true. We've got another caller. This is a 914 area code, so if you're calling from 914, I'm putting you on the line here. Thank you for calling into the God Discussion Show.
Hey, how you doing? I really appreciate this program. My name is John. I have a YouTube channel. I'm going to do a shameless plug here, Modern Deism. I'm a deist for about 2 years myself, raised Catholic, and then I was a born-again Christian. And thanks to the Internet and all the different people you wind up meeting, because when you're a Christian, for the most part, you're surrounded by people who share the same beliefs, so that belief system is constantly being reinforced. So, I mean, thank God for the Internet, and when I got YouTube started getting popular and questions were being raised, it really had me rethinking what I believe and why I believed it, and started reading about the question of hell was the first main issue, and I just couldn't imagine a compassionate God that is preached by Christianity sending, by their own rationale, most of the population to this eternal hell because they don't believe in Jesus. So that was definitely a major factor. And then I dealt with the deity of Christ and getting to church history and how the Bible came together, and I just had to face the fact that it was, not for me. But I couldn't deny certain experiences. Maybe, sure, they can be explained probably by some kind of, psychology or emotionalism or something like that. But I have experienced certain spiritual experiences. So I couldn't deny an existence of God or a first cause, if you want to call it. But I feel more freer than ever now as a deist to have that free thinking and not have the guilt feeling that you get from Christianity, to explore other different beliefs such as, different Eastern religions, which, I can kind of resonate with some of stuff like with Taoism and Buddhism and this consciousness thing. So a lot of what I've come to terms with is that we're pretty much all agnostics with our own leanings towards a particular belief. I call myself a modern deist because I think that involves my belief evolving around creation, which Thomas Paine says is the word of God. It cannot be forged, it can't be duplicated, and it's understood by the whole world. And I also put my beliefs around reason and just my personal experiences, which is objective to everybody. But I don't define, my experience as absolute truth. And, as long as you're not taking your experiences and making them absolute truth for me, then we're good. So that's how pretty much my beliefs have come to evolve over the years.
I hear this quite a bit, and thank you very much, John, for calling in, that deism does kind of allow that freedom from dogma. And you spoke of the same thing, Jayson. Do you see this a lot with fellow deists?
Oh, yeah. There's only one. Well, actually, there are only two beliefs in the whole thing. Base your beliefs on reason, and reason leads us to conclude that God exists. I say, and this may offend some deists out there, the only difference between a deist and an atheist is that a deist believes that God exists. Otherwise, deists believe anything else they want to believe.
True.
I agree with that. Somebody in the chat room, they did some follow-up about this thing about Jefferson swearing on a Quran. He said, let me see if I can see, that maybe it was a congressperson, but anyway, that's
what I found out too.
Yeah, so that contract is that is all withdrawn. It's a moot point. But somebody mentioned, and the last caller, about Thomas Paine and the Age of Reason. I just loved that book. That book was probably one of the most freeing things, I think, for me as I left kind of the born-again Christian experience. Did you have a similar experience after reading Thomas Paine's work?
Well, I was already headed in that direction, but I was amazed by the book. Thomas Paine is just so intelligent and so insightful. He taught me my first Bible contradiction, and the contradiction comes at the beginning of the Gospel, Matthew. It talks about there are 14 generations between this and this, there are 14 generations between this and this, there are 14 generations between this and this. And Thomas Paine pointed out, in one of those steps, there's actually 13 generations. And I wrote it down on a piece of paper, and I looked at it, I said, he's right. And I found a lot more contradictions after that.
The end of his life was just, he did do so much for this country, and now they don't even know where he's buried. And, I think there was something like a year ago where one of the states refused to acknowledge him at all. Would you think that on a cultural level that maybe people are softening in their views towards deism than they did during Paine's time?
When I study history, I see the general progression of history in favor of reason and science. Yes, we sometimes take a step back for every 2 steps forward, but we're heading that way. And eventually, I predict that the majority of people on the planet will either be deists, agnostics, or atheists. And when that day happens, Thomas Paine will be a very celebrated human being, as he deserves to be.
I look forward to that day. Oh my gosh, do I look forward to it? I'm a fan of that day too.
Oh.
I'll look forward to that. Is it right if I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
What about the idea that God did create the universe, but is no longer in existence, or doesn't really, or is completely unaware of us? I've always imagined that it's possible that, again, as I said before, I don't dogmatically believe that God is impossible, especially given the vaguity of how vague the definition could be. But the entire universe could technically be just some advanced being's third-grade science experiment, and that the entirety of the universe was basically just, for that being's perspective, a blink of an eye. Is that something that you believe could be possible as well?
Well, first of all, it's important to define the word God. I don't like it when people define the word God as a force. I think that's how Spinoza does it, just like the way that the universe works. Why use the word God then? I define God as the being who created the universe on purpose. Now, the question is whether that being exists or not. The universe, to me, looks like a masterpiece. And when I think of masterpieces of art, such as paintings and sculptures and great books, those things took a lot of planning, and they took a lot of work to make. And that's how I think that the universe came about. Now, another part of your question is whether God just created the universe and lets it run free like a clock, or whether God
not necessarily run free like a clock, but doesn't necessarily is even aware of our existence or intended our existence to be the case, one or the other.
Right, and that's what Aristotle thought. Aristotle thought that God existed, but God accidentally created the universe. I find that very difficult to believe because, as I said, the universe seems like a masterpiece to me. It would take a lot of planning and work to make. And to say the truth, if God accidentally created the universe and is not aware that the universe exists, that's almost like God.
I'm sorry, I wasn't clear. Not that the universe doesn't exist, but that we don't exist. I could imagine that we've created many things in the lab, and imagine within those things life is created and we're not even aware of it.
Right, and if that is the case, I don't believe it is the case. If that is the case, then God is pretty much just like an impersonal force, like a quantum fluctuation in a vacuum, which some people say started the Big Bang. And in that case, well, it really doesn't matter, except for just intellectual curiosity, that God exists.
Okay.
Did I answer your question okay?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
Okay, well, I want to steer this back to separation of church and state types of things. You mentioned about, maybe there's going to be a day that everybody is either atheist, agnostic, or deist.
I said most people. There'll always be
okay,
people
most people.
Yeah.
Okay, I stand corrected. But let's say, I think that some of the extremists in our society, the religious extremists, whether they're Muslim, Christian, whatever they are, kind of recognize that on some level. And so they're coming out with the big guns. And so you've got people like David Barton, who, he's teaching this version of history that people like Chris Rada and many others take issue with because he kind of makes up quotes and takes things out of context, but yet he's promoted all the time on shows like Glenn Beck. Every single one of these Christian dominionist types of things, there he is. When you hear this type of thing, does this concern you that we need to get more involved, perhaps in correcting these types of things? Because now this thing is being folded into the Texas school books.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We need to speak up as educated, honest people and encourage everyone else to be educated and honest. It's evil that somebody would distort the truth knowingly. And from the sounds of it, that's what David Barton does.
Well, it is, and I saw a poll somewhere where 68% of Americans now think that we are a Christian nation and that all the founding fathers were Christians. And Barton says things like, well, yeah, Thomas Jefferson was a deist, but he believed in Christ, and he tried to create all of these, Christian schools for the Indians to turn them into Christians. And when I hear this stuff, it just makes me like raving mad. But this man is very good at presenting what he does. And so in a way, I feel that it's important that your message get out a little bit more about what deism is so people understand it.
Well, I'd like to say that the Declaration of Independence, which was written by Jefferson, does mention nature's God. But that's a deistic conception of God. The Declaration of Independence does not mention Yahweh or the Trinity. And we need to remember that that Jefferson was an outspoken deist. The Declaration of Independence mentions nature's God in passing, so it is by far a more secular document than a religious one. Deism is also by far a more secular philosophy than Christianity. Furthermore, I just want to add that the United States Constitution does not refer to any deity except for where it says, written in the year, 1778 A.D., and that's just a convention of dating. If the United States was supposed to be a very religious nation, its Constitution should have at least mentioned a deity, and if it was supposed to be a Christian nation, its Constitution should have started off with the doxology of the Trinity and praise to Jesus or something like that. So,
well, that's
the
so
United
true.
States was not founded as a Christian nation.
And Barton even says things like Jefferson signed these papers that said in the year of our Lord Jesus Christ, blah blah blah. And it turns out Chris Rada did some research on that. Those were simply shipping labels that had it pre-printed on there. But that is how insidious this type of thing is going on, and it really kind of concerns me. And then we see, sort of following with all of that, all the fights over "In God We Trust" on our coinage. We've one nation under God that's been added to the Pledge of Allegiance, and then these people that want 10 Commandments erected all over the place. From a deistic point of view, when you see this kind of thing, and even the 10 Commandments, what is your gut reaction? Do you approve of it or not?
Well, I'm speaking for myself. I'm not speaking for all deists. But I absolutely believe in the separation of church and state. Public schools are government institutions, so they should not be pushing any religion. I am against the phrase "under God" in the Pledge of Allegiance. Why should agnostic children or atheist children be forced to say that? That's wrong. In any case, people can, come to their own conclusions about that. We're talking about promoting patriotism. You don't have to believe in God to believe in the United States.
And, when there are references to God in, various structures in Washington, D.C. that were, made at the time of the founding of the country, Dan Brown makes it real exciting. But when these things were added back then, I don't think that they had a Christian agenda in doing so. But now it's almost like God is exactly the same as this Christian God that's sort of defined in their point of view. Do you have any comments about that? Oh, yeah.
I believe that there's a good chance that everyone who signed the Declaration of Independence and everyone who, I don't know, did anyone sign the Constitution? I don't remember. But anyone who helped make the Constitution, I believe that they all believed in God. Some of them were Christians, some of them were deists. Maybe there might have been a Jew involved in there. I'm not sure.
There was at least one or two Jews, if I recall.
Okay. All right. Well, they all believed in God, and also we have to remember that this secularism had not come as far by 1776 and 1778 as it's come now. But the United States was a big leap forward away from the Middle Ages. The founding United States was a lot of progress for the Enlightenment. So they did pretty well for the time that they were at. And probably the collective consciousness of these people was that it's okay to talk about God. It's okay to do things, that might promote the belief in God. But it's not good to promote a particular sect of Christianity. And in the case of many of the founding fathers, it's not good to promote Christianity at all.
Yeah, and that's the difference, I think. It's sort of along those same lines. Now, deism obviously believes in intelligent design. But the term intelligent design as being interjected in, it
Hello?
Hello, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here, yeah.
We hear you now, Deborah.
Okay,
yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. So anyway, the same line of thought with intelligent design. Deism obviously accepts intelligent design, but it's with these people that are trying to put it into the textbooks, I think that intelligent design for them is the 7-day creation story in the Bible. How do you feel about what's going on in our science classes and these moves to teach intelligent design in school?
Those darn creationists stole our deistic term, I bet. They failed trying to get creationism to the school, into the public schools. I think they were struck down by the Supreme Court or something like that in the 70s. So they're trying a more scientific-sounding approach called intelligent design. Now, I believe that the universe was intelligently designed, but I certainly don't believe in the Genesis account that the world was created in 6 days. And if I nitpicked, I could find some things I also disagree with that. I believe that public schools are government institutions, and as such, they should not promote any particular religion. There is no need to teach any religion in science class.
I'm so with you. We only have about 6 minutes because, I know you have to get up for work tomorrow. So I wanted to touch a little bit about what you guys are doing. Your website is deism.com. And,
yes.
We could hardly even, touch on anything that's on that site in just an hour conversation. There is so much that you have on that site. And now one of the things I noticed is that the contact list seems to be growing quite a bit. And you have people that are contact serving in the United States and worldwide. And I noticed there are quite a few in Turkey. Why the big interest of deism in Turkey?
Well, as Anthony said, deism is something that people from any culture or religion can pick up on. And Muslims are very interested in looking at creation and, trying to understand God that way. There were centuries when Muslim countries were far ahead of Christian countries in science. Turkey might be, I'm not sure, but it might be the most free Muslim society. So you can combine freedom with people who are questioning Islam, you're going to get a lot of deists.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I found that fascinating that you have so many there. Now, people, if they contact deism.com and some of the folks that are associated with the site, is there, something that they can, is it made mostly so that they can ask questions about deism, or do you guys support groups, get-together groups where people can talk about what they believe and how does that work?
Well, Bob Johnson founded the World Union of Deists in 1993, and his goal was to teach the world about deism and to help deists connect. And that's the purpose of the website and the organization as a whole. He's had a lot of success doing this. As you see, we have many contact people throughout many countries. We even have one deist reason center, which is located in Washington, the state of Washington.
Oh.
And we're trying to do more and more of these things. I tried to organize a local deist meeting once near where I live, and, we met together, and there's just a few people. But as time goes on and there's more and more deists, hopefully we'll have more and more meetings like this. I wouldn't mind meeting once a month with a group of people who are interested in deism, and we could talk some philosophy or just just be friends, and then maybe decide to do something worthwhile, something educational, something charitable. That's what we're hoping to do.
And it's not like church, or is it?
No, it wouldn't be church. I don't even think we'd have a prayer.
Are you guys involved in any kind of church and state activism, or is it more philosophy?
Well, I don't know. Do we have? We might have an article up about separation of church and state. I'm not sure. The World Union of Deists is doing mostly education. We're teaching people about deism. We're trying to get people to base their beliefs on reason. And if you base your beliefs on reason, we believe that that will help promote a culture of secularism.
Bob Johnson is such a great guy, and he's going to be writing on God discussion. So we'll be able to promote this idea a bit too, because we do get a lot of people there who are having tremendous trouble with religion, and they don't know what to do with these feelings. They don't know where to go. And atheism may be a little bit too harsh for many, and I think that deism provides sort of that soft landing, that you can still believe in a higher intelligence and honor reason and honor common sense. Do you see a big movement? Are there more and more people that are contacting deism.com with those same concerns?
Oh, yeah. I get emails all the time, but I'd like to point out that deism is not supposed to be a soft landing. It's supposed to be an honest choice. If a person honestly wants to base his or her beliefs on reason and comes to the conclusion God probably exists, they'd be good ones for our organization. If they base their beliefs on reason and honestly come to the conclusion that God does not exist, well, they're better off contacting atheists, some atheist organization, for fellowship and guidance.
I think what they were talking about, I think if you talk to most atheists that were once Christians, or theists in any variety, I think you'll find 9 times out of 10, they made it, at the very least a brief stop, maybe not a brief stop, but at the very least a brief stop in deism. That's how I was. I was a deist for a short amount of time as well. And most of the people that I know that are atheists that were once Christians or other theists were deists for, at the very least, as I said, a short time.
Yeah, I thought that might be what she meant, but I just wanted to say something to just point out that the purpose of deism is not to provide a soft landing. And I once again, I was aware that Deborah probably didn't mean it that way. And you know what? Life is hard. I'll take all the soft landings I can get.
There you go. Well, Jayson, I really, really appreciate the deists and all of the work that you do. Really, you guys have put such an incredible amount of work into deism.com, and it's just so refreshing to find theists who can think logically and aren't out to get everybody and dominate them with their dogma. Do you have any closing remarks for the audience?
Yes, I would like to quote 2 bumper stickers.
Ooh, bumper sticker! Oh, I love it.
Yeah,
I am pro bumper sticker.
Good. Yeah, there's some good ones out there. And I actually am a public school teacher by trade, which is why I call myself Jayson X. I don't want to get myself fired, and I don't want to get unnecessarily hassled.
That is a wise move, sir.
Yeah, I wish I was wise from the beginning, but I wasn't. All right, anyways, as a public school teacher and a taxpayer, I say, if you don't pray in my public school, I won't think in your church.
Oh, is that a revealed text?
It should be. I got one more for you. And as a secular American, I say, religious freedom is measured by the distance between church and state.
Beautifully said. Beautiful. I love it. That is so good. Well, Jayson, I really appreciate it. We talked, what was like 2 years ago on the show? So we're just catching up
right.
again. Yeah. And you're just so knowledgeable, and I really do urge people who are interested in deism to go to your website, which is deism.com, because there is so much more there than we've covered in this last hour. And so, Jayson, I really want to thank you for joining us.
I want to thank you, too, for, working with people like myself to promote reason and to promote the separation of church and state.
Well, I appreciate that big time. All right. Well, thank you, and you have a great evening, and we will be talking soon. I'll send you an email after the show.
Okay, great. Good night, everyone.
All right. Good night, and thanks.
Nice talking with you, Jayson.